Hi guys, I'm Billy and let's talk books. Today is a very, very exciting video for me. I mentioned in my booktube and newbie that I grew up very much in that YA dystopian era, and so, as can probably be the case for everybody in that generation, I am a huge, huge fan of The Hunger Games. I live, breathe, eat and sleep this series, and I have since it first came out. I literally watch the movies all the time. I'm obsessed with Jennifer Lawrence and Josh Hutcherson and Woody Harrelson and just everyone. Elizabeth, I'm so sorry I'm forgetting your surname right now, but all of the above. I love those movies so much. I love the book series so much. I think that they have the most incredible characters, character development. I think Suzanne Collins writes in such an unbelievably brilliant way. She really gets across important themes and problems in our society into this kind of dystopian young adult fantasy setting, but in a way that teenagers can both understand and not feel they are being spoken down to or feel like they're being preached at. I think she has just really figured out a way to tick every box that she needed to tick, and it will forever live as one of my favourite series. Now, here's a bit of story on the prequels. So this video is going to be me reviewing the 2 prequels to the Hunger Games universe, and I first read Sunrise on the Reaping. So to explain a little bit about that, when the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes was announced, I was thrilled, but then I found out it was following Snow, and I was a little bit like, I don't really need a villain origin story. Snow is evil and I don't care to know why. I know that sounds a bit silly, but I just wasn't that fussed about it, and I was kind of bitter that I didn't get the prequel that I wanted. I'm so sorry, Suzanne Collins, I'm selfish. What can we do? And so I never actually read that one, and I never watched the movie either. But then when Haymitch's prequel was announced, I was like, yes, sign me up. I need this in my life. I need it now. I ordered the copy and got it delivered straight to my door on the first day it was released, and I read that in 24 hours. So I can't remember when it came out now, but I think it was a bit of a while ago, but not too long ago. I'm filming this on the 17th of December, so I'll put a little text box when the actual date was that it was released. But yes, I read it straight away. I read it in 24 hours, and then I was so back in the Hunger Games world that I read The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes immediately afterwards in the next 24 hours. So this video is going to be me going through my thoughts, opinions, feelings, and more on the 2 Hunger Games prequels. So let me pull up the books now. We have got Sunrise on the Reaping here. I'm so sorry that these are always going to be back to front. That is not going to change because for some reason I literally cannot deal with my face being on camera in the correct way. I have to always flip it and mirror it. It just doesn't feel like me when I'm watching it the other way around. So yeah, these are going to be backwards all the time, but I hope that's okay. So we have The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. No, this is not The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, Billy. Think. This is Sunrise on the Reaping, Haymitch's prequel. And then we also have The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, which is Snow's origin story. I'm not going to hold these books up for very long because they are massive and they are hardbacks, so I'm going to put these back down for now. I'm going to talk about these in this video in the order that I read them. So like I said, I read Sunrise on the Reaping first before Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, which might be a little bit off. I think that after I read Ballad, I probably had a bit more context to Sunrise on the Reaping, but that's okay. This is how I read it, so this is how we're going to do it. So, Sunrise on the Reaping, when I tell you that this was the actual dream of my life, I'm not over-exaggerating. I could not have been happier to have received this news. Teenage me had the best day of her life that day. And so maybe I was going into this a little bit with very, very, very high expectations, but I am pleased to say that this book literally met every single one of my expectations. I loved it so much. It was like being back in that world, completely immersed all over again. I had the same exact feeling of just, you cannot put this book down. Every chapter you need to read the next chapter. And I was so in love with the characters and so just pleased to be given more content in this universe. My one negative is the cover. I really don't like this cover. I remember when I first saw it and I was a bit like, ooh, I don't like that. But to be fair, I actually don't really like the Hunger Games covers either. I know there's been some newer ones which are really, really nice, but my original copies that I had were kind of like just these really like bold colours with patterns. And yeah, I'll insert some copies of it here just so that you can see the ones I'm talking about. Let me talk a little bit more about specifics then. The writing and the structure of this, I just personally loved how it just really followed that almost perfect cyclical narrative that Collins had developed in the first two books. I know that Mockingjay kind of follows a different structure, whereas like the first ones we had starting in District 12 and then we go to the capital, we have the train ride, we have the chariot rides, we have the training, we have the interviews, and we have the games, and then we have following the games. So it's just the perfect backdrop. I don't think that she needed to change it, and maybe other people might have been bored of this, but for me, it was just like, no, this is exactly what I wanted. You are giving me what I ordered. Adding on to this, though, I was still able to be surprised from each little bit. I felt kind of like, obviously we get kind of spoilers about Haymitch's games, and I felt a little bit like, I know what this is, I know what it's going to be, so I'm not really going to be that surprised throughout. But in every single section of the novel, there was a way that I was like, whoa, I did not see that coming. I'm so shocked by that. I'm so emotionally devastated by that. All of the above. The writing is just, honestly, just as good as I remember. And that is the highest praise that I can give. So yeah, I just felt so honored to have this book in my hands and the ability to read it. Now, let's talk about the characters as well. I thought the characters were really engaging and fantastic. We had some old favorites, but we also had some new characters, which were really well developed. Now, I want to talk about Haymitch first. Now, of course, I've always been obsessed with Haymitch. I love his character in the main series. I think of him as just that, older, grumpy father figure who doesn't really want to be a father figure, but can't help it because he is a kind-hearted soul at the end of the day. He just had some troubles in his past. In this, I really appreciated that he wasn't painted almost like your typical hero story. And I think that Collins did this very well with Katniss as well. Katniss didn't really choose to be a martyr. She just wanted to protect those that she loved. And I think this was paralleled very well with Haymitch, because especially starting at the beginning of the novel, you would think that Lenore Dove would be your typical protagonist. And I think if this was a different author, we probably would have followed Lenore Dove, and she would have been the one sent into the games because she's the one with the rebellion. She's the one that is challenging the system and questioning authority. Whereas Haymitch is just kind of like, I just want to get by, feed my family, make sure that I can spend time with the girl that I love and, enjoy my birthday without the capital interfering with that. So I appreciated that he was almost just another cog in the wheel of the system that had been created. At this point, it had been going for 50 years. So a lot of people will just be accepting of this. And he was another one of those people until obviously he's thrust into a position where he can't ignore the situation anymore and he has to make a decision on which side he's going to be on. So that was really great to learn about kind of how he was as a teenager. It was devastating to see his family being around him because obviously we don't see him with anyone when he's older. So it was just crazy to witness that. I think that the thing that really made me fall in love with Haymitch all over again in this series was how he too, like Katniss, just had this inherent understanding of what was wrong and he could not sit by and watch. He had to get involved in a way that he didn't even really mean to, but it just wasn't an option. And I really appreciate that with his character. He just always knew the right thing to do and he couldn't watch cruelty play out in front of him without choosing to say something about it or do something about it or take people under his wing. He wasn't selfish in any way, but he was also just a regular boy. So yeah, the parallels between him and Katniss were fantastic. I always felt like the two of them were very similar in the original series. They're very different as well because Haymitch is much more, I think, charismatic and friendly with others and willing to make connections, whereas Katniss was a bit more standoffish, but they both have a lot of similarities. So his character was just done really well. We'll talk about Maisie next, and I just adored her. I loved Maisley so much. She was a standout for me. And I know that at the beginning we're kind of setting her up to be this snobby, judgmental, almost bratty kind of character. She's quite a stuck-up character. And maybe so, but I think that Suzanne Collins really allowed depth with this. It wasn't just, well, she grew up and she thinks she's better than everyone. We got information on how she believes that by not letting others bring her down or making her seem like she's less than, she was able to maintain her sense of self and her sense of self-worth. And that is such a hard thing to do when you have grown up in a system that is constantly telling you that you are less than others. And I feel like in that sense, she wasn't tearing others down to make herself better, which maybe we thought at first. Instead, it seemed like she was just holding on to her worth and not caring if that affected other people. And I think there's a conversation to be had about this, about the fact that she did have privilege and she does have a certain authority in the town, but at the same time, if other people aren't able to exhibit that behavior in the way that she is, that's not really her fault. So I thought it was a challenging and interesting conversation there, but obviously when she calls out the capital and she's not afraid to stand up for herself and say, I'm worth more than this and I won't be spoken to in a certain way, I just respected her so much for that. And I think that as time went on and we saw her with other characters and some of the other kids, you really saw that she was very caring and she was a selfless person and she wanted to protect others as well. So I think that she just got some great character development. I loved her spunk and her fight and just her capacity to never give up or back down or make herself less than she was. She was just absolutely brilliant. Next character, I'll just talk about a few of the main ones in this section, but Lenore Dove. I thought that Lenore Dove was very sweet. She had a lot of interesting ideas, especially for someone so young, and I appreciated that she could kind of understand more outside of the propaganda that she was being fed, and she was able to really fight back against that and challenge Haymitch as well with certain conversations. I really enjoyed that. I think she was a little bit of I don't want to say a manic pixie dream girl because she wasn't, but I do think that we only ever really saw her from the perspective of Haymitch, and obviously Haymitch is totally in love with her and sees her as the most amazing girl in the world, and we never really got much time with her outside of that or from other people's perspectives. So she was a bit of an enigma to me. She's just the girl who loves to sing, raises geese, likes to eat sweets, and I'm redacting that because I think it was a spoiler. So I did like her, but I don't think I was attached to her in the same way I was with Maisley. I honestly think Maisley was a much better character for me, and I was way more invested in her relationship with Haymitch. I don't mean in a romantic way, just in a pairing kind of way. I cared way more about their developed relationship over his and Lenore's, even though I did see the subtext and I saw how much Haymitch loved Lenore and how much Lenore loved Haymitch, and so it was still lovely. I think I just didn't get enough time to develop my own opinions on that. Amput as well was one of the main characters that I just adored. What a sweet little funny, just smart, caring little boy. I fell in love with him as well. I'm not going to talk too much about what happens because I'll save that for the spoiler section, but I just really appreciated his character and everything that went down with him and the plans that he came up with and his attitude to everything. So yeah, great character there as well. We saw a lot of other characters from throughout the series in this novel as well, and honestly, I was just so pleased every time that I saw one of them. And it makes sense to me that we would see a lot of the other characters because in the main series, especially in Catching Fire, you get the impression that all of these victors and mentors have such a rich history with one another, and Katniss and Peter are very much the outsiders. They're meeting everyone for the first time like we are, but the group as a whole will have been together for years and years and years. So they obviously have a very big history there, but here we were able to kind of see some of those threads and some of the ways that they had gotten to know one another. So that was great. I loved that, and it's always fun to see characters that you love repeating and reappearing. So yeah, that is that. Overall, I'm just gonna say, yeah, it blew me away. I was still really surprised, even though I had that familiarity and that feeling of home. God, calling the Hunger Games home. Ooh, that's a terrifying thought, to be honest. I wouldn't ever want that to be my home. The characters in the world and the writing, just all of it feels like home for me. So I don't remember where that sentence started. It's gotten away from me. That's right. It was able to feel like home while still keeping me engaged and surprised throughout. So honestly, in terms of what a prequel is, I just think it was everything I needed and more. I know some people are like, oh, leave the world, leave the Hunger Games. But to be honest, I'm one of those people that if she writes a book for every year of the Hunger Games, I will be reading those religiously. So that is my feelings about it. I'm going to go into a spoiler section now. I feel like I've rambled on for ages already, but this is the Hunger Games. I love it so much. So let's go into the spoiler section. I'll put a timestamp where you can skip past if you haven't read it yet and you want to just see my final rating at the end. So for this video, I'm going to kind of talk about it in chronological order. So beginning again and starting off with being in District 12, having the black market, going beyond the fence, just all those things. Again, just like I said, felt like home. And I felt like it was a good setup for like who Haymitch is at this point in his life, what his desires are, what his ambitions are. And they weren't really many. It was just to see his girlfriend, have a nice birthday, get through with the reaping and work hard and get his jobs done. So yeah, a good setup. I was in shock when Katniss's parents finally get given names. Can you believe this? We finally know their names. And what brilliant names as well. Burdock Everdeen. I love that name so much. I love that it comes from a plant in the same way that Katniss and Primrose did. And just being able to meet him felt so special because we'd just heard so much about his character and he was just as sweet and lovely as I thought he would be. And seeing Katniss's mum as well while she still lived in town, she was still a townie, her name being Astrid. Again, great name. I cannot explain to you how happy that made me just to finally know what her parents' names are because they never got given them in the series. So that was great. I loved that. The reaping. Now, the reaping was absolutely wild to me because, you know, you go into it and you're like, well, I know what to expect because Haymitch is going to be reaped. So I guess we'll like see who the other characters are that he'll be going in with. But when I got to the end of that chapter and a different name was called out, I was genuinely jaw to the floor. What? What do you mean? But it's Haymitch. How does that happen? Again, this is an example of the way Suzanne Collins was able to surprise me still, even though I knew a lot about what happened in this story. And then seeing the way that Drusilla orchestrated the entire thing. So Haymitch goes to protect his girlfriend Lenore, and because of that they basically say, okay, well I guess you can replace him because the previous guy had run off and was shot for trying to escape. And so they replace him with Haymitch, put on this whole orchestrated show of them picking out his name and then filming the reactions and everything. I know I should expect this from the Capitol. Like, I know how terrible they are, but even this was just crazy to me because a part of me was still like, well, they have rules though, right? Like, they're chosen from a ball. It's random. It's just a lottery, but evidently not. And then it makes me think, I wonder how many times they've done this where they've put in a kid by choice. So that was crazy. I think that this is the beginning as well of the hugest theme throughout this novel, and the theme here is very much how you can orchestrate history and facilities of memory like film or news or, you know, all that kind of media to tell a story the way you want it to be told. That, I think, is the biggest theme, and it was set up here with how they just completely covered up what actually happened in District 12. Now, that scene that I kind of referred to earlier with Drusilla and Maisley on the train, oh my god, I was like, again, oh my god, I cannot believe you just did that, but hell yes. So Drusilla makes a really rude comment, and when she slapped Drusilla around the face, I was like so shocked by that and just immediately team Maisley. I feel like in Katniss and Peter's games, especially in book 1, there was such a like fear of the Capitol. They felt like they couldn't really do anything wrong because it was just so structured and organized, whereas Maestly is just like, no, I'm going to do whatever I want. And actually, I have power over you because you keep acting like you're so powerful and full of authority. You're from the capital. But actually, they can replace you like that. I can't click with my left hand. Let's try again. They can replace you like that. That's better. And I'm here, one of the victors that they need to keep for this games. So you're not going to intimidate me and make me feel like I have to take any of your. So yeah, I loved her. The other two tributes as well. So we have Luella, who I just thought was such a sweetheart, and it honestly broke my heart and made me feel so nostalgic when Haymitch calls her sweetheart and she has 2 braids and he like fondly takes her under his wing as his like little sister figure and calls her sweetheart. And I was like, oh my god, is that why he calls Katniss sweetheart in the series? Like, it wasn't a sarcastic way of demeaning her at all, it was actually a fondness. Is that why? Please be why. I think that's so adorable. I think they do address it further on in the novel, don't they, that like it kind of slipped out for him. So yeah, I think it was a sign of affection more than anything. But Luella, what a little sweetie. I was so sad about what happened to her, and that was just crazy as well. And then we had Woodbine. He was a very interesting character as well, actually, because we never really got into the idea of betting and odds, especially in the districts to do with the Hunger Games. Like, we kind of saw that odds board in the movie, and we also knew that they were kind of sponsoring their favorites, and it was implied maybe there was like personal stakes involved with that. But I think it was an interesting conversation that even the people who are your family, your literal family, and people who know you and your friends might be placing bets on your life. And this concept of betting and trying to get money out of other people's misfortune, especially here, was just very interesting. And I liked the way that he surveyed the competition. And of course, it's very like rational and almost sociopathic to see it this way. But at the same time, if that's the way your mind works and you see things kind of in statistics, then it is fascinating, and it is an interesting way of observing what's going on around you. So I thought that his commentary was actually quite helpful. So the next section is kind of like where they're training and getting ready for the games beforehand. And again, this chariot scene, another scene that is complete copy paste from the original. We expect this, but it's just done in a completely different way because of the chaos that ensues and the way that the chariots go out of control. And one of the tributes, Luella dies. It was just another way where I was so shocked by what was happening. And I feel like this was that moment for Haymitch where he couldn't stand by and he had to make them accountable for this little girl's death here, in the same way that Katniss did so with Rue when she covered her with flowers. And I just loved those parallels there as well. I was so proud of him in that moment for doing that. And he really started to show his development from this point onwards, I think. I was really intrigued by the idea of mentors because honestly, when I thought about, well, who would have been the mentors before Haymitch, I thought they just wouldn't have a mentor and they would just be left alone. It's like, well, that's too bad. You're District 12. You don't ever win. So you're going to have to deal with it on your own. But then it makes more sense that they would need people there in case they received sponsors and to kind of explain the rules to them, things like that. So yeah, it was so interesting to learn how that was managed, and seeing Mags again, oh my god, that made me so happy. I mean, obviously Wiress as well, but I definitely wasn't as attached to Wiress as I was to Mags. So getting her throughout this whole section, that made me so happy. And when she gives Haymitch that hug and he just breaks down because she's such a comforting presence and she always was that. I just adore her so much. So happy to see her again. And I really appreciated how when she sat all the tributes down and she was like, well, what is your goal? I can't remember exactly how she phrased it, but it was like, tell me what you want out of this whole situation. And he wanted to make sure that his family didn't have to see him die in a gruesome way, and he also wanted to show them that they're human beings. And I just really appreciated that as a mentor. It wasn't about, okay, how can we get you to win? It was, what is it that really matters to you as a human, as an individual, and how can we make that happen for you? Because let's face it, they're in the worst situation they could possibly be in. So in a way, it reminds me again of that comment by Peter of, I just want to be more than a piece in their games, and this was Mags's way of allowing them agency and power over their own choices and their own lives that had been completely stripped away from them. So just honestly, like, the themes from the original series that I loved so much really melded through into this novel, and that's why I loved it so much. What else? The training. I found it really wholesome, to be honest. And again, this was a new way that we saw how the training unfolded, because with this you had Ampert, who we find out is Beatty's son. I'm going to talk about that in a second, but he comes up with this idea that, you know, the careers always win, they always team up. What about the rest of us? Like, they try to keep us separate, but maybe we can come together and we can form a friendship and a group and a camaraderie, and that's another way that we can have agency in this. So I really loved that, and honestly, like, the training just felt really sweet. It was like them being able to sit together at lunch almost, in spite of this really awful situation. They could get to know each other and they could bond with each other, and they could find a way to break the rules almost. So in terms of Ampert being Beatty's son, again, I think this was really cleverly done, because it was implied in the first series that the capital would punish the victors in this way, and because they'd become celebrities, it was almost like, oh, well, if we bring their family members, if we bring their kids into this, then that will be great TV, or it would even be a way to punish them. And Katniss was terrified that if she ever had any children, or for her other family members, they would be plucked into the games, because she'd seen it happen. And I guess this answers my question from earlier of, like, the way they orchestrate the games. And so yeah, it was just crazy to see that, like, in action in the flesh. Now, when they brought out the fake Luella, I'm going to call her Lulu from now on, as they do to distinguish the two, that was genuinely horrifying for me. Like, that felt like actual body horror, the way that they had taken over her body, control of her body and mind, and inserted technology and certain aspects literally into her flesh. Oh, it was just genuinely horrifying, because, like, first of all, this is a child, and then second of all, like, where has she even come from? We have no information about her, and she's being passed off as somebody else. So again, this is a way of them manipulating the story so that people don't know what actually happened, and they think that the capital is in control, and it's all this propaganda. But oh god, this poor child, that was just genuinely just so horrific. I feel like that's genuinely one of the most messed up things that happened in this book. And even the way that they could use her as a spy, and they could, like, pump her full of drugs. Oh my goodness, absolutely horrifying. So when they talked about the plots and in terms of, like, bringing down the games, I wonder at this point as well then, because Beatty apparently had tried something similar. So, like, I want to know the history of, like, what they've covered up. How many plots have there been, and how many tributes have actually gone out of their way to disrupt the Hunger Games? Oh, I'd love a history of that, but obviously it's been rewritten and it's been taken out, so yeah, but it was interesting. So Haymitch getting given a 1 in his training was so funny to me. It's just so ridiculously stupid on the capital's part, honestly. That's what I was thinking. Like, nobody is going to believe that he's gotten a 1 for his actual ability. They see that he's, like, pretty capable. Like, getting a 1 is like the bar is low. Like, maybe he could have gotten like a 4 or a 5, and that could have been believable, and they would have just thought he was useless. But getting a 1, that's, like, iffy. But I loved how Haymitch was able to play it up himself and take advantage of that situation. Although, you know, it made me sad that he then wasn't able to be a part of the group, because he could tell that they were targeting him. So yeah, but it was funny. And then we got Effie back. I loved seeing Effie. The beginning of a beautiful friendship right there. I love that. And I think, again, this gives a lot of context to their relationship in the series, because this really shows you that Effie has been by Haymitch's side since the very beginning and has seen what has happened, and it almost makes her response to him and her anger and frustration at him so much more tragic and personal, because she knew what he was like before the drinking, and she must have such personal involvement in his story. So yeah, just added some really nice extra context there. I feel like I'm talking so much about this novel, so let me try and move it along a little bit. Now, in terms of the arena, I loved seeing more descriptions of the arena, but I felt like we kind of already had pieced that out from the previous one. But yeah, what a sick, twisted game that the game makers were playing here, where it just makes you feel like you're in paradise, but literally every single thing in this place is designed to kill you. I mean, it's a great metaphor, isn't it, for life in this society in Panem. That's right, Panem. I couldn't think of what the name of the overall world state was called, but yeah, in Panem. It feels a bit like that. Like they tried to convince you that you have all these lovely things, but actually there's just none of it. Again, I was just on the edge of my seat for the whole games. I think that it's interesting, isn't it? Because the games are so fun to read and so like impactful and devastating and high stakes, and so like you want to read them, but then at the same time it's like, are you then being placed in the position of the capital citizens who are watching it and who are getting a type of voyeuristic thrill out of the games? Obviously it's fiction, so like it's fine, but it is definitely interesting. And I mean, my favorite part of the novels aren't the games, it's more the themes and the power and the politics, but it is fun and it's an interesting commentary on how engaging these games are to read about and to watch in terms of the movie. So yeah, I just think that's interesting. Again, I just loved Haymitch and Maisley's relationship, how that grew and developed and how they just really had each other's backs, and the way that they fabricated and changed the narrative so it seemed like they didn't really care for each other and they just kind of buddied up because they were both from 12, and Haymitch basically was just like, yeah, you go off on your own and like we'll just go our separate ways, when actually like they really cared for each other. And that just made me so mad. I loved Maisley though, and the way she went out was so sad. I wish she could have survived, but you know, I loved seeing Haymitch take on her necklace as well and some of their tokens to remember the fallen tributes and keep them with him as he was going. Now that final battle as well with Haymitch and Silka was just absolutely brutal. That was written in such a like descriptive way with Haymitch's guts all hanging out and everything like that, but again, just the way that he used the arena against them. And obviously I know that he did this whole plot and that was all taken out of the footage, but he really was the Katniss before Katniss, wasn't he? Like, he was a huge problem and he was the one that was going to take it down, and just unfortunately it just wasn't the time and they just couldn't manage it and they didn't have enough resources and they didn't have the support of the public, so it just wasn't to be. But yeah, it's just crazy to finally see why Haymitch was so invested in this whole plot with Katniss and Catching Fire. Is him almost waiting for this opportunity to come around again. So after the games is my next section to talk about. Oh my goodness, just the fate of his family. Oh, it was so sad. The way that he didn't even get to say goodbye, and when he got home, they were already gone. Like, I'm getting emotional just thinking about it. Oh, how just utterly devastating for him. Like, you can't recover from something like that. And then the way that he then goes to Lenore and sees the sweet and knows, like, he convinces her to eat it, but then he realizes what has happened and it's too late, and it's too late for him to save her, and just in one quick motion he just has lost everything. All the people he formed bonds with in the games, his sanity and his ability to sleep at night, and just dealing with all this trauma from that, only to come home and lose everybody that he cares about. And you know, even the people who are still around him, like Burdock, who tries to be there for him, and he knows that he can't let anyone close to him because the capital will just take that from him as well. Oh, it's just absolutely utterly tragic, devastating, so sad. But I think that's interesting as well, because we finally get to see that it wasn't his own, his own inability to cope almost, and why he turns to alcohol and why he distances himself. It's almost this threat, like there's nothing else he can do. So I think that adds a lot of nuance to his character as well. He never really actually gave up, even though we feel like he did. It seems like in the novels he has given up, but actually he never really does, and we don't know that until now. And I just think that really adds so much strength and power to his character, and just how crazy that it would take 25 years and eventually it would be Burdock's own daughter who would be the one, and he would be able to form this little family with her. Like, it just makes me so emotional, that epilogue, and just seeing Katniss and Peter again. Oh my god, I didn't expect that. I was so happy. I cried so much. I was so happy seeing them, and the way that he finally was at a place in his life when he could open up and tell them about the people that he'd lost and what he'd been through. And we as the reader got to experience that as well. That line about how he knew that Lenore had forgiven him because he he completed her promise to her, but at the same time, he knew that she wouldn't let him be with her yet because he had to take care of his family. Oh my goodness. So emotional. And sorry, I'm swearing. The geese, the way that Katniss gets the geese and Peter gets the incubator, they just know exactly what to do. And I've loved this about these characters from the beginning. Like, they don't have to say anything. They just know each other. They know what they've been through. They understand it themselves and they know how to make it better. And oh my God, it was everything. It was all the stars. Give it all the stars. Let's end our spoiler review there. To continue with what I was just talking about in the spoiler section, give it all the stars. It's a 5 out of 5 for me. 5-star read. I loved it so much. It was everything. I'm so excited for the movie. I literally cannot wait. I think this is one of those series where the movie really does justice to the books. The acting, phenomenal. They kept the themes and the messaging. The way it was shot, the creativity is one of those films that I really feel like does justice. And the new one looks like it's going to be more of the same. The trailer looks fantastic. The arena looks fantastic. The actors who have been cast for the roles, what an incredible cast. And I've heard that Katniss and Peter, Josh Hutcherson and Jennifer Lawrence are going to be returning for the epilogue. This is the best news of my life. So yes, I'm unbelievably excited. And Woody Harrelson better return as well. I'm sure he will. But if not, I'm going to be so upset. Anyway, yeah, overall, 5 out of 5 stars. I'm so happy. I loved this book so much. I was so pleased to read it. And yeah, that's that. So, like I said in the intro, after I finished Sunrise on the Reaping, I immediately picked up Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes because I was like, yeah, I'm not ready to be out of this world yet. So let's read the next one. I really liked this one as well, I will say. It wasn't as good as Sunrise on the Reaping or the original series, in my opinion, but I still liked it and I appreciated that I read it. And, you know, I didn't read it back in the day because I guess I thought that I wouldn't enjoy it, but I did enjoy it. So I'm glad I read it. It was very interesting to see how the Hunger Games as we know it came to be because it was very, very different in these early years. It was more just like a punishment for the districts, and it was a very brutal, more like a gladiator style event but with kids. So seeing how that was twisted and developed into a spectacle and a way of creating entertainment and of making the capital invested, it's so twisted, but it was great to see how that developed and how that came to be. And this all comes from Snow himself, really. When we read this novel, it's really clear that he was the one responsible. So I really liked that and I liked learning the history of it. I did find it a bit dull at times. I think that it wasn't as gripping and engaging as the other novels have been. And I know some people don't particularly like Mockingjay and find it just quite depressing and a bit slow, but I really enjoy it still. I really enjoyed how I felt like this book never tried to redeem Snow and never tried to give him humanity. And I feel like maybe other people might disagree with me on this. This might be a bit of a hot take, but in my opinion, Snow was shown as a selfish, narcissistic sociopath from the very first, and that never changed. Being inside his head, seeing how he responded to things, he never did anything selflessly. I think that it was all done because he wanted control of something, or he wanted to gain something, or he wanted recognition for something. And he never was given that, I wonder if he could have been different. I wonder if he has a heart. I personally felt like he never did, and it was never shown that he did. He was a complicated character, but always rooted in that evil and that sense of snobbery and selfishness. So yeah, I enjoyed that a lot about the novel. Lucy as well, really fascinating character, I think, because we only see her from Snow's perspective. So I think that allows you to really kind of read between the lines on who she is. And that was great. So surface level, from Snow's perspective, she is just this silly girl who, you know, needs help, needs his support to be able to survive, and she's so in love with him, and of course she is, and this is how he's going to help her and they can become a couple and they can get through this together. And for me, I don't see her that way. I felt like she was just as smart, just as calculated and cunning, and able to manipulate the situation just as well as Snow was. But there's a key difference in the two of them, and that is that Lucy is here and trying to survive. She is doing what she is doing because she's been forced into a situation where she doesn't have power, and she needs to come up with a way to get through this. And I think that she does so fantastically, and that she plays Snow and the capital and the audience and the people around her to get them on her side and to charm them to her so that she can survive. And I thought that was great. She seemed like a very smart character to me. Maybe not even my favorite. I think that there were things about Lucy that, again, I can't really judge her for it though. Like, I see her as quite a fake person, and that she's always putting on an act and always trying to be somebody else or present something else other than who she is. But I can't fault her for that. Like, of course she is doing that. And I just would be fascinated on like who she really is, who, like, what her desires actually are, what her goals are, and what her personality is, because I don't think that we got to see much of that. I think we just saw, one, Snow's perspective of her, and two, her facade that she puts on in order to survive the Hunger Games and the world that she's living in. So yeah, great characters. And I think maybe why I'm not as like endeared to this novel is that I wasn't like really rooting for anyone. I didn't love anyone in the narrative except maybe Sejanus. I really enjoyed Sejanus and I was really rooting for him. But the two main leads, they weren't like in my heart. I wasn't particularly fond of them in that way, but I found them fascinating. And so that's still a positive from me. All the songs and everything like that I found that really annoying. I hate songs in books. I think it's one of my like biggest pet peeves because they just never sound like their actual songs, and I can't imagine how they might sound. It's just like almost like poetry written on paper, but not very good poetry. I don't know. I hate songs in books, so that was really annoying. The information about the covey as well was interesting, but again, I didn't care too much about this. I think that it added some interesting information about how Pan Am worked and maybe about how it was beforehand, because they were kind of like a traveling group of musicians who were forced to settle in District 12. And so, you know, like there were some interesting things about them, but all in all, I wasn't that bothered about learning more about them. So I don't know, maybe other people feel differently, but for me it was just a bit like, yeah, okay. So let me talk a little bit more in depth about the characters. So I feel like I have already gone into the two main ones quite a bit, but I just want to say that I found Snow just so icky. Oh, he was so horrible to read. Like, I just hated him from the beginning to the end. The way that his mind worked, and oh god, it was just, I could see how he was justifying things to himself and how he was trying to puzzle it out. You know, that comment about you're never the villain in your own story, and he very much believed this. He was very much the villain in my story. So reading about that, oh, it was just so icky. I feel like he is the definition of a true sociopath, to be honest. So yeah, he saw everyone around him as a threat. Everyone was beneath him, and even those that he considered to be family or those that he loved, he didn't love. He just needed and he wanted for personal gain. So like with Tigress, it's what she can bring for him, and with Lucy, it's how she can fluff his ego and make him feel special and make him feel clever and desirable. So yeah, like I believe he wanted her to win, and I believe that he wanted her survival, but I don't believe he wanted it for her. Like the second that she wasn't about him anymore, he like switched. So yeah, I was just really scared for Lucy throughout, to be honest. I never knew what he was going to do. I think I've talked enough about Lucy, so I'm just going to go into Sejanus. And he was probably my favourite character. I also loved Tigress as well. They were probably my two favourite characters in the novel. But I think that Sejanus, just what a great and brave and just silly but noble guy. Like, he was never going to go the way he wanted, and he had too much optimism and too much hope, and I guess you can't fault him for this. Like, I'm glad that he retained that part of who he was. Just what a difficult situation to be in. That is going to be all for my spoiler-free review. So just to sum up, I enjoyed it, not as much as the other books in the series, but it had interesting information that I appreciated, and the characters were fascinating. So yeah, I'm going to go into spoiler section now and talk a bit about the plot. So I'll just go over this a little bit like how I did with Sunrise. I'm not going to go into as much depth because I worry about how long this video already is, and I liked Sunrise much more. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about certain thoughts I had throughout. Like I kind of said before as well, it's crazy to me how much of this was actually orchestrated by Snow. Like the sponsorships, the ideas of giving them food and parading them around like celebrities, making the capital citizens root for them, pick favorites, and almost have it like this big entertainment piece. This all comes from Snow. I think that was very interesting. I was honestly thrilled when that mentor was stabbed by her tribute. Like, I don't care, it's brutal, but I literally don't care. So when the mentor is kind of like waving food in front of her face after they're starving and the girl just stabs her and she dies, oh, I was thrilled. I was very happy about that. Serves you right. I also really liked the commentary on stardom and on how certain people are just primed for playing up a crowd. And I think that Lucy was the exact best representation of this. So she is just a star and she has this ability to shine on a stage and on a platform. And I think that she was the reason as well why things started to kind of change, because they understood that, well, maybe we don't want to see them as human, but we can see them as almost this icon, this feature that we can put on a platform and ogle at and use for our own gain. So that commentary on like celebrity status and celebrity culture and how people kind of idolize while still not humanizing celebrities was an interesting commentary in this. So when Lucy saves Snow's life, again, I just don't think she did it because she cared for him. Like, maybe she did care for him, but I still think she would put herself first. And I think it was more that she knew she couldn't escape and there was no point running and she needed him. So she saves him. Like, I don't know. I just think it's like very interesting to try and speculate on these things. Oh, the whole situation with Sejanus and Snow and how, oh, he's just so naive and I feel so sorry for him and I feel bad for even saying that, but just the way that Snow is able to convince him that he is doing all of this as a friend and Sejanus really believes him and trusts him. And I was just like, no, don't believe him. Like, it's so clear to me as a reader being inside his head, but at the end of the day, this is what these types of people are capable of. They convince others that they're on their side and they can be trusted. And I was just like, no, don't believe him. I hated the whole thing with Dr. Gould, to be honest. I don't know. I just found her very weird and creepy and just strange. Like, obviously she's that kind of mad professor vibes. And it's interesting to see how mutts and mutations kind of formed and where it came from, but it was just very odd. I don't know. I thought she was a very odd character. Maybe other people have like interesting analysis on her that I'm not picking up on, but yeah, I just found it really odd. And like the whole scene with the snakes being put into the arena and Lucy singing to them, and obviously she's not actually singing them away from her. It's because they have her scent, so they're not going to hurt her. But I don't know, just the whole setup of that and then the way that it appeared, like her singing was what saved her. Oh, I hated that. But maybe that's the point. Maybe the point is that other people might eat that up. I just didn't. And I mean, like, other people in the capital might eat that up as like a sign. The games were okay, but yeah, I definitely cared more about like the politics of what was going on and the characters and their relationship than the actual games themselves. Marcus, that was very sad. I just think it was horrible seeing the tributes treated in the way they were. But yeah, I didn't have too many thoughts about that. So after the games, I was surprised that we got such a large section after the games, and I was so shocked that Snow was being sent to District 12 because, you know, we didn't know how much of a history he had with District 12 up until this point, but it's a big one. And I mean, it makes sense now why he was so almost like threatened and enamored as well in equal measure with Katniss. There's a lot of intertwining of him with District 12. I think that his behavior there again just shows how much of a sociopath he is, though. Like, he doesn't care about the people. He doesn't care about what he's doing. He has no feeling about any of it. He just cares about himself, what he can get from Lucy, and how he can like gain a name for himself and get some type of power. So, he was just the worst the whole time. I hated his like jealousy towards Lucy as well, because obviously she'd written a song for another boy and she dated another boy, and we never know, like maybe she was still in love with this boy. We don't really know much about it, and maybe she had to put that to the side to protect herself by, you know, aligning herself with Snow, but we never would have known because he wouldn't have allowed that to be explored. I can't remember too much about him. I remember he wasn't that nice of a guy though, so like maybe it's for the best. But yeah, I was just always really worried about what Snow was going to do to her. It was very unsettling seeing his responses to her having other people in her life, and it just was a good commentary again on this type of abuse and control that relationships and people like this, narcissistic abusers, how they operate. His betrayal of Sejanus as well, and how he ended up getting him hanged. Oh my god, I hated him in that moment because it wasn't an accident. He wanted Sejanus out of the way, and he did what he needed to do, and he even tried to convince himself and us that he cared, and he didn't mean to, but he absolutely did mean to. And oh god, what a hateful character. It was crazy to me as well that we got to see the origins of the Hanging Tree song and how that has passed through to Katniss all the way from 50 years ago. I love seeing kind of that trail through history being witnessed, so I really liked that link being closed almost. The ending as well. Now, I think when I first read it, I was like, I don't like it, because I wanted to know what happened. But after sitting with it, I think it was the perfect ending, because we don't know what happened. Just like the rest of the novel, it's like we don't know what Lucy was thinking. We don't know how Snow would have responded if he didn't think she was trying to kill him. But I think I can figure it out, honestly. Like, from my headcanon, she didn't mean to kill him. She wasn't planning to kill him, and maybe he even knew this, but he needed a way out at this point. And so he was able to convince himself that she was a threat to him. She wanted to kill him, so therefore he had to take her out, because that was a convenient way for him to be able to go back and claim his power. But I'm also open to the suggestion that she actually was trying to kill him and maybe failed, because like I say, I think that Lucy was a very calculated character as well, and I wasn't convinced of her feelings towards Snow at all throughout the novel, so maybe she was trying to take him out. The characters come full circle. That was definitely the best part of this novel for me, was how interesting the characters were and how you could try to like pick up what their motivations were and try to understand why they were doing what they were doing and what was actually the truth, because I don't think Suzanne Collins really gave us the answers. Now, the question of did he kill her or not? Because we don't know, do we? I think that he did. I think that she died. I think that's my canon, because I just feel like I don't think there's any way she would have just run off into the sunset, never to be heard from again. I think she died, unfortunately, because I was definitely rooting for her. So that will be the end of my spoiler review as well. Ending thoughts for Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. I really enjoyed the characters. I liked learning some of the history about the games and Panem and how it came to be. Snow was just exactly what I expected him to be, but in a very interesting way. And I'm going to give this 4 stars because, like I say, I'm just obsessed with this world. Anything I get to read in it is going to just be a great old time for me, but I'm not going to give it the same kind of rating that I gave the others. I haven't ever rated the original series, but I think I would probably give The Hunger Games a 4.5, Catching Fire a 5, and Mockingjay a 4.5, and then Sunrise would be a 5, and this one a 4. So yeah, that is my thoughts about the Hunger Games prequels. Do you think we're going to get another one? Honestly, I just will read anything. Anything, please, Suzanne Collins. I'm just so glad that we're getting more in this world, so I'm just very honored. Teenage me is so happy, and that is going to be the end of this video. Let me know, did you enjoy the prequels? Did you feel like they were necessary? Did you have any criticisms of them, or did you just eat everything up like I did? Please let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Like this video if you enjoyed it, and maybe consider subscribing to my channel. Thank you very much. Have a lovely rest of your day.